Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Boost Up English on the Learning English with Podcast channel, where we discuss the most common challenges English learners face and provide practical solutions to help you become a more confident and fluent speaker. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Emma. Today's episode is dedicated to a very common issue many learners experience. I can understand English, but I can't speak. If you've ever felt like you're able to understand movies, songs, and even conversations in English, but when it's your turn to speak, the words just don't come out, this episode is for you.
That's right. We're going to dive deep into why this happens, what's holding you back, and most importantly, how you can overcome this challenge to speak English confidently. So let's get started. Hi, Emma. Have you ever heard people say, I can understand English, but I can't speak it?
Oh, yes, I've heard that so many times. It's a common struggle for English learners. They can listen and read quite well, but when it comes to speaking, it's like their brain freezes up.
Exactly. I think part of the problem is that understanding a language and producing it are two very different skills. Do you think it's mainly about confidence, or is there something else going on?
Confidence is definitely a big factor, but there's more to it. Speaking requires practice and active engagement with the language, which is often lacking. You can listen to English every day, but unless you're trying to speak, your mouth doesn't get used to forming the words.
Right? It's like any physical skill, isn't it? You have to train your muscles. Listening gives you passive understanding, but speaking is like using those muscles actively.
Exactly. Also, when we listen, especially to native speakers, we don't always catch every word, but we get the general meaning through context. But when we try to speak, we feel like we need to get every word perfect, and that pressure can be paralyzing.
That's true. It seems like a lot of learners have a fear of making mistakes, but making mistakes is how you improve, right?
Absolutely. I always tell my students that mistakes are part of the learning process. If you're not making mistakes, you're not challenging yourself enough. But there's this pressure, especially with English, to sound perfect or native-like, which can be overwhelming.
I wonder if part of that comes from comparing ourselves to others. When people hear native speakers, they might think, I'll never speak like that. But the goal doesn't have to be perfection, just communication.
Exactly. Fluency is more about being able to express your ideas clearly than speaking like a native. I think learners need to focus more on being understood than on being perfect.
That makes sense. So, what do you think are some practical steps for learners who understand but struggle to speak?
One thing I always recommend is shadowing. It's where you listen to a native speaker and try to repeat exactly what they say, mimicking their pronunciation and intonation. It's a great way to train your mouth to produce the sounds of English.
Shadowing is a great technique. It forces you to actively produce the language, and it helps with pronunciation and rhythm.
Another important thing is to create more opportunities for speaking. This could be joining a conversation group, practicing with a language partner, or even talking to yourself in English when no one is around.
Talking to yourself sounds a bit funny, but it really helps. When I was learning Spanish, I would describe everything I was doing in the language, like I'm making coffee or I'm walking to the store. It was great for building confidence and vocabulary.
Exactly. It's all about making speaking a habit. Even if you don't have someone to practice with all the time, you can still work on fluency by keeping your brain engaged with the language.
What about dealing with the fear of mistakes? How can learners overcome that?
I think a big part of it is shifting your mindset. Instead of focusing on speaking perfectly, focus on communicating your ideas. Accept that mistakes are part of the process. Also, find supportive environments where you feel comfortable practicing. If you're in a group or with a teacher who encourages you to speak, you'll be less afraid of making errors.
That's great advice. It's important to remember that even native speakers make mistakes when they talk.
Exactly. Another tip is to slow down. Many learners feel like they have to speak quickly to sound fluent, but it's better to speak slowly and clearly. That gives you time to think about what you want to say and reduces the pressure.
I totally agree. Speed doesn't equal fluency. It's all about clarity and confidence. Do you think vocabulary plays a role in this struggle too?
Oh, definitely. Sometimes learners understand a lot of vocabulary passively, But when they try to speak, they realize they don't know how to use those words actively. So, expanding active vocabulary is key. Learning words and phrases you can use in everyday situations.
And repetition helps with that, right? Like using new vocabulary in conversations or writing to reinforce it.
Yes, repetition is crucial. You have to actively use new words to make them part of your working vocabulary. Reading and listening help you encounter new words, but speaking and writing are how you really make them stick.
So, to sum up, the keys to overcoming the I can understand but I can't speak problem are building confidence, practicing speaking regularly, expanding active vocabulary, and not being afraid of mistakes.
Exactly. It's about finding balance between understanding and producing the language. If learners stay patient and consistent, they'll see progress.
Great points, Emma. I hope more learners can take these tips to heart and start feeling more confident in their speaking abilities.
Me too. Speaking English doesn't have to be scary. It's all about practice and persistence.
So that's it for today's episode of our English Learning Podcast. If you've ever felt like you can understand English but struggle to speak, we hope today's conversation has given you some practical tips and, more importantly, the confidence to keep going.
Remember, speaking is a skill that takes time and practice. Don't be discouraged by mistakes. Embrace them as part of your journey. Keep shadowing, talking to yourself, and looking for opportunities to speak. You've got this.
Absolutely. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more discussions like this one. We'll be back with more tips and strategies to help you on your English learning journey.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Keep practicing, stay motivated. Don't forget to check the free PDF in the description for more useful vocabulary. Goodbye, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Let's look at some words related to today's topic. Fluency. Definition: the ability to speak or write a language easily and accurately. Example: achieving fluency in English takes consistent practice and exposure. Confidence. Definition: a feeling or belief that you can do something well or succeed at something. Example: you need confidence to speak English without worrying about mistakes. Intonation. Definition: the rise and fall of the voice in speaking, which can affect meaning. Example: shadowing helps you learn the proper intonation of native speakers. Passive. Definition: involving receiving information without active engagement, such as listening or reading. Example: listening is a passive skill, but speaking is an active one. Active. Definition: involving direct participation, such as speaking or writing. Example: speaking is an active skill that requires you to form and produce words. Repetition. Definition: the action of repeating something that has already been said or done to improve learning. Example: repetition helps in reinforcing new vocabulary in your active memory. Vocabulary. Definition: the body of words used in a particular language. Example: expanding your vocabulary is key to improving your speaking skills. Shadowing. Definition: a language learning technique where you repeat what a speaker says, imitating pronunciation and rhythm. Example: shadowing is great for improving both pronunciation and fluency. Pronunciation. Definition: the way in which a word is pronounced. Example: improving your pronunciation will make you more understandable when speaking. Mistake. Definition: an action or judgment that is wrong or incorrect. Example: making mistakes when speaking is a natural part of the learning process. What are some reasons why learners can understand English but struggle to speak it? What techniques were mentioned in the podcast to improve speaking skills? How can shifting your mindset about making mistakes help you become more confident in speaking English?